When I think about passive versus active, when people are starting out, I generally just discard it entirely because they typically don't have sufficient capital in order to actually make meaningful passive income, and they would get significantly higher returns on increasing their active income. And virtually every extremely rich person who's self-made, as my asterisk, generally has gigantic active income and only begins to look at passive when they have so much money from reinvesting in their higher return things, which is what got them this very large active income, that they're like, where else should I put it? And then at that point, it's really a question of diversification, which is like, how much more do I not want to double down on the main thing? And that's a completely personal question. And there is no, in my opinion, there's no right answer to that because that's a fundamental, like, how much risk do I want to take, which I see is entirely personal. And so I would rather think for the person who's starting out, not like, how do I make this passive, I'd rather say, how do I get more leverage on my active? And so like I could start by shoveling snow in the beginning. And then once I save up enough of my shekels, then I'll buy a snow blower. And all of a sudden I can go from doing, 1 driveway an hour to doing 3 driveways an hour. And then boom, I tripled my income. Now for that 1 week that my cash flow is down because I had to buy the equipment, I'll have made less money, but then I'll very quickly recoup it. Now to the same degree, that's in a capital expense from an equipment perspective, but you can do the same thing from a skills perspective I give a classic example of a phlebotomist as somebody who draws blood. In the US, I think they make somewhere in the neighborhood of like $25 an hour, something like that. It doesn't take very long in order to become a phlebotomist and it doesn't take a lot of money. And so, a couple of weeks, you do the studies, you get your cert, and then all of a sudden you take minimum wage. And as long as you're not in San Francisco, you'll have doubled or tripled your earning capacity in just a very short period of time. And so that's a very good return on capital. And so that's where I think about the best investments for people who are starting out, who have, call it sub $10,000, sub maybe $25,000. It's like I put all my money into how I get more leverage on my active, which is either going to be more skills or more actual physical equipment in order to get returns on the skills I already have.